From the New York Times, it's The Headlines. I'm Tracy Mumford. Today's Thursday, September 12th. Here's what we're covering. In the wake of the Harris-Trump debate, both campaigns are in full strategy mode, trying to read public reaction and mapping out their next moves with just 8 weeks to go until Election Day. 67 million people watched the debate, making it the most watched moment of the 2024 presidential race. And many commentators, even Republicans, have concluded that Harris succeeded in knocking Trump off the messaging his team had hoped he'd stick to.
The debate on Tuesday did not go how Donald Trump's allies and supporters had hoped.
Times politics reporter Shane Goldmacher covers Trump's campaign. He says while Trump has been calling it his best debate ever, privately, several of his aides and allies have conceded he had a rough performance.
His team had prepared him for pivots during this debate, how to transition from attacks that Kamala Harris was expected to make back to the issues he wanted to talk about, chiefly the economy and immigration. Instead, he was drawn into the fights that Harris wanted him to have. His supporters are bracing for the possibility of a series of negative news cycles and even a potential bump in the polls for Kamala Harris. Now he's looking to get back on track. He's scheduled to go to Tucson and Los Angeles and then a rally in Las Vegas as well, a series of events, some of which are built specifically about the economy in order to get himself back on the topics that he wants to talk about.
Meanwhile, Times politics reporter Reed Epstein's been covering Harris's post-debate plan.
The Harris campaign believes it's finally been able to do what President Biden couldn't, and that's make the 2024 election a real referendum on Donald Trump and his fitness and capacity to serve again as president of the United States. With Tuesday's debate, Harris's campaign believes that the American people and voters in the critical battleground states will turn their focus to whether Trump is up for the job. And they intend to place this question at the front of voters' minds through her public appearances and television advertising through the last 8 weeks of the campaign.
Reed says that Harris's team is all in on a second debate. For his part, Trump said yesterday he didn't know if he would agree to that. In Ohio, the town of Springfield has landed in the middle of the immigration debate and the presidential race. In 2020, the population of the town was just under 60,000 and shrinking. But city officials say that 20,000 Haitians have arrived there in the last few years, taking up manufacturing and warehouse jobs and helping revitalize the town. Their arrival has put pressure on housing, schools, and health services, and tensions have simmered, ramping up over the last few months. But they reached a new height when Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, made the Haitians one of his talking points. He claimed Springfield was overwhelmed, and there were people who, quote, shouldn't be in this country, even though the Haitians are in the U.S. legally. Vance amplified an outrageous false claim that the immigrants were eating their neighbors' pets, a claim that Trump himself then repeated in this week's debate. And Vance evoked one family's tragedy, writing on social media that a child was murdered by a Haitian migrant. The child is Aiden Clark. He died last summer when a Haitian driver in a minivan crossed the center line and crashed into his school bus.
To clear the air, my son, Aiden Clark, was not murdered. He was accidentally killed by an immigrant from Haiti.
This week, Clark's father, Nathan, spoke out against the politicians who've been talking about his community, including Trump and Vance.
And look what you've done to us. We have to get up here and beg them to stop. Using Aiden as a political tool is, to say the least, reprehensible for any political purpose.
At a town meeting, Clark called on them to stop spreading hate in his son's name.
You know, I wish that my son, Aiden Clark, was killed by a 60-year-old white man. And I bet you never thought anyone would ever say something so blunt. But if that guy killed my 11-year-old son, the incessant group of hate-spewing people would leave us alone.
In Louisiana this morning, hundreds of thousands of people are without power, and local officials are warning about dangerous flooding after Hurricane Francine made landfall. The storm strengthened to a Category 2 hurricane just an hour before coming ashore near New Orleans yesterday. The airport closed down, and many colleges and universities in the area canceled classes today and warned students to stay sheltered. Francine, which is now weakened to a tropical storm, is tearing through a stretch of the country that's been battered by a number of devastating storms in recent years. Hurricane Ida, which hit the coast as a Category 4 in 2021, caused so much damage and then made insurance so unaffordable that many residents left the region altogether. New Orleans has seen the steepest population drop of any major metro area in the country. Election officials are raising the alarm that issues with the Postal Service could prevent some Americans' votes from being counted this year. A bipartisan group of officials from around the country sent a letter to the U.S. Postal Service yesterday, urging it to take action on lost and delayed mail. Officials say they've seen hundreds of recent instances where ballots are arriving 10 days or more after being postmarked. As first-class mail, ballots are supposed to get there in 3 to 5 days. They also warned that some ballots were being mistakenly marked as undeliverable, which could eventually get people kicked off of voting rolls for being inactive. The letter said, "We implore you to take immediate and tangible corrective action," and that, quote, "failure to do so will risk limiting voter participation and trust in the election process." In response to the letter, the Postal Service told the Associated Press that there have been issues with mail delivery as it works to modernize its systems, but that it's ready to handle election season. Still, the Postal Service urged people voting by mail not to procrastinate. And finally, marmosets are chatty. The small South American monkeys whistle and chirp and trill. And a new study says that buried in all of that noise, the monkeys are calling each other by name. They're the first non-human primates to be observed doing that. The research went like this. They'd bring two monkeys into a room. They could see each other, talk it up. Then a curtain would come down between them. Recordings show that when the monkeys lost sight of each other, they'd start producing unique, high-pitched calls. After analyzing over 50,000 of those calls, the researchers found differences depending on who a monkey was calling out to. For a long time, scientists used to think giving names was a uniquely human thing to do. Then dolphins were observed using names, and parrots. And earlier this year, scientists announced elephants seemed to be doing it too, in their low-pitched rumbles. One biologist told The Times, "I think what it's telling us is that it's likely that animals actually have names for each other a lot more than maybe we ever conceived. We just never were really looking properly." Those are the headlines. Today on The Daily, Nippon Steel, a Japanese company, has been trying to buy the company U.S. Steel for $15 billion. Why President Biden is likely to take the rare step of blocking the deal. You can listen on the Times audio app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Tracy Mumford. We'll be back tomorrow.